Okay, so it's been a little while since my last video. Last one was on the 9th. Yep, last one was on the 9th. So a lot has happened since then. I'm just gotta charge my iPad. I've been studying all day, so it's low. So a lot happened between now and the last video. So I talked in my last video about how it was kind of a gamble, that I didn't know if I should study to extreme depth or if I should hit high points or somewhere in the middle. I remember being very unsure about that and calling it a gamble. So my strategy was to just kind of hit the high points, know what the slides say, but don't get too conceptual into it unless he really hammers on it. So basically just know the facts and be good on that. Because the breadth of material, I mean, it was over 300 slides. You can't get an extreme knowledge of 300 slides when the exam is pretty close up. There's no way you can memorize like the intricate pathways and really get super in depth with the material. So for me, that was a challenge because that's how undergrad was. It was you're given, we'll call it 100 slides, and you have to get really in depth in those 100 slides. And this class was, I'm not going to say it was the opposite, but it was definitely a change of pace. So thankfully for me, that gamble did pay off. I got a 35 out of 40, and then I got one of the questions he gave us points back on, so I got a 36 out of 40. So I was very happy about that. And then, of course, that led into, and then the EKG exam, it was basically the opposite of anatomy, or I'm sorry, of physiology. Physiology covered, we'll call it 300 some odd slides. EKG was like, I don't know, we'll call it 100. But those 100 you had to know in, out, forward, backwards, sideways, upside down, which is more of what I'm used to. So it felt like I was just right back at home, which is fine. I mean, I'm so happy about that because I felt familiar with that style of test. We did very good on it as a class. Me personally, I got a 94.8, so I will obviously take that. I'm not going to talk specifics about like what the exam content was or like what were the high points, what did the professors focus on, what were the questions on the exam. I'm not going to go over that because that's opening a can of worms that I just don't want to deal with. So I'm just going to leave it at that. So overall, happy about that. If you knew the slides were pretty good, as long as you understood it conceptually. So like for physiology, it was more of just, do you know that the sclera is the front part of, or the outer layer of the eye, or do you know that the cornea is the extension of the sclera? It's just black and white. But EKG has that little bit of subjectivity to it where, you know, you have to interpret a little bit. So the interpretation was more of my speed. So I did good on that one, thankfully. And then the anatomy exam, same professor as physiology. For me personally, that exam was easier. It covered a lot more slides. That one, I did the math. It was about 700 slides it covered, which as long as you break up the studying and do like 2 slide sets a day, it's not so bad. It's just time consuming is really all it is. But like I was saying, it's either you know it or you don't. It's either you know where the cornea is and the sclera and the iris or the organ of Corti or the tectorial membrane. It's just, do you know where it is or not? And you don't have to know particularly what it does. Like, you don't have to know, like, oh, if this muscle moves, what happens? It's more of just, like, what is the muscle that goes from here to here? And you just have to know it. So I was very happy with how I did on that one. I got a 98 on that one. I'm so exceedingly happy about that. One thing I'm learning for exams is time management. So for the physiology exam, I finished that one really quick. I think I finished it with like 30 minutes to spare or something like that. I've always been a pretty fast test taker because it's either I know it or I don't, and I don't really spend time thinking about it. So I finished that one early, and then I just looked through my answers again. Wasn't happy because I feel like I went back and forth on some of them I shouldn't have. So then I learned, and I changed what I did for anatomy, but I'll get to that one. Drug test, that one, the time limit was kind of short, but we made it work. EKG exam, I finished pretty quick. Definitely finished before the majority of the class on that one. I was very familiar with the material. I'd made some study videos for classmates, and I've helped answer questions of classmates for EKG, so I just kind of knew the material in and out, so there's no point to waste time on it. So my strategy, I started with on the EKG exam just to kind of see how it felt. My strategy overall was to go through the questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just down the line. I would do question 1. So I would just read what the question was. It would be like, this is not on the exam. I'm just coming up with something that has to do with the heart. It'd be like, where is the mitral valve? All right. So before I'd look at the answers, I would cover them up. So I would mentally cover them up and just read, all right, where is the mitral valve? Okay, that one's going to be between the left atria and left ventricle. Okay? And then I'd find that answer. And then I'd read through the question point blank again. All right, where is the mitral valve? Answer it again in my head, double check the answer, and that was good. So let's say I didn't realize, or I didn't know the answer for question 7, right? So if I came to question 7, I was like, I don't know that one. I would read through it once, think about it for a second. If it didn't hit me right away, I'd flag it and then move on. So that way, I could spend the majority of my time hitting the questions I knew right away. Because if I spent 10 minutes on one question, I just shot myself in the foot for the rest of the exam. Because what I spent on that one question, one 10-minute question, means I missed 10 one-minute questions. So I'm obviously playing the point game because there are going to be some layup questions where you can just, it's right there. So if you don't know the really hard ones, at least get the easy ones done before you circle back to the hard ones. So that was my strategy for that one. I felt better about it at the end of it. And because I read through each question so many times, it meant on my second run through of the exam, just like checking answers, it went really quick. I barely even read the questions. And all the flagged ones, so the flagged ones I was okay with changing my answer on. But if it was a non-flagged one, I just really wouldn't change the answer. If it felt really right the first time, I'd stick with it. The only situation where I would change the answer of a non-flagged question was if I would bet $1,000 on it. That was my line. If I wouldn't bet $1,000 that the answer was B instead of A, I just wouldn't change it. I would leave it. The whole thing of like the first instinct and all that, whatever. So that was my strategy for ECG or EKG. And then I rolled that over into the anatomy exam, which I studied my butt off for. So I studied really hard for that one. Same strategy, which was if I know it, great. If I don't, I'm flagging it, moving on. I finished that. I finished EKG with time to spare, which I said already. And then anatomy, I finished really quickly on that one. Just because I either knew it or I didn't. And I didn't dwell on ones I didn't know too much. No real point in doing that. One benefit of physiology and anatomy for us, and this is subject to change depending on who you are, where you are, what program, if your professor changes, if the professor changes, or whatever. For us right now, it's non-cumulative, so I won't see the material again, which is fine by me, because it'd be too much. Our professor specifically said if there was a cumulative final for A and P, it would kill the students. And you know what? I venture that he's right, so I'm very thankful that there's not. So next week and that one, we'll handle that when we get there. Those are my 2 exams for the week, which would be nice. So yeah, things are kicking off a little bit, but this week was just a really rough week. There's no other way to slice it, in the sense of it was just a busy week. Now, from basically here on out, it's almost always 2 exams per week, which is fine because the way they stack is not too bad. This one was just bad because of how it all stacked, basically, in the sense of it went from the 13th to the 19th to the 21st to the 25th. Those were all just stacking up really bad. If you see it on a calendar, you know what I'm talking about, but I'm rambling. So other than that, just been kind of staying on top of stuff, making sure I'm not behind on any deadlines, making sure I turn stuff in. There's not a lot of fluff in these grades in the sense that there's no like homework assignments that boost you by like 30%. Some classes have small little buffers, other ones don't. Excuse me. So it just kind of comes down to the brass tacks. And I've got to write that in because I forgot about that. I'll do that later or tomorrow. So yeah, just staying on top of stuff seems to be the best strategy. Study a little bit at a time. I'm studying for exams starting a week out. So if I have an exam on the 10th, I'll start studying on the 7th. And that gives me plenty of time, especially for like A and P. I feel like it's very necessary. Basically, regardless of class, I'm doing 2 slide sets per day if there's an exam upcoming. And then I leave 1 or 2 buffer days between the exam. So just kind of giving myself plenty of time if I need it. As for the hours studied, time dedicated to school has been 7 to 9 hours per day. So not awful, but it is definitely a lot. So you got to make sure you're leaving time to just have fun. Don't lose touch with your friends, but you going into the program, you kind of realize that it is going to be your job, right? Everyone always says like, make college your job, whatever. It's especially true for this program so far, in that you need to live the life. If you go into this with the undergraduate mindset of, oh, well, I had class, I'll study for an hour, and then I'll, go out partying, and then I'll sleep in and do whatever, that flat out will not fly here. And it is not an up for debate type of thing. It's not like, I'm really smart. It won't fly here. Everyone's going to study a little bit differently. Some people like groups better. Some people will like individual studying better, supplemented with groups. Personally, I've been doing good studying alone because I struggle to focus in groups, but I have been getting input from other students. Like I'll ask questions, they'll answer me and explain it in different ways, and I'll do the same for them. So that works out really good. We have a pretty good system so far. A couple people are really good about making some study guides, which I'm very thankful for. So I kind of return the favor by making study guides, or rather making videos for other courses, just to kind of help the load out. Because if I do EKG and then let's just say someone else does anatomy and another person does physiology, the time I spend on EKG, I can't study for A&P, and the time the physiology person spends, they can't study for anatomy or EKG. So if everyone builds up this kind of library of supplemental materials and has that kind of support network of, all right, you spent some time on EKG, let me help you digest the anatomy stuff quicker. Because some of the classes, let's say it's 10 slides, those 10 slides might have a commonality where as long as you understand what the similarity is and how all of the slides interconnect, you don't have to worry about the 10 slides because you just boiled it down to those 1 or 2 sentences. So for one of them, an example would be for anatomy, it was like, I don't know, we'll call it 30 slides of just words on paper, locations, and things like that. But because it was vessels, it didn't make sense in words. So all we did was we took the words and wrote out a pathway of where blood goes once it leaves the heart. And if you could draw that diagram, there was no need for you to read through those 30 slides because you already had it. So, just something to keep in mind. That's held true for a lot of my classes so far. And that if you can boil it down and make it manageable, your life will get easier. Because I've always found that if you know why something happens, you don't need to memorize the details because you can logic your way through it. And that's held true so far, so I'm hoping it stays that way. There are some things you just kind of gotta deal with. There have been a couple roadblocks I've had where I just can't learn the system or there's not enough time, so I just have to know, alright, A, B, and then C. I can't figure out like, oh, well, the order of the alphabet, and then, Sometimes you just gotta brute it. Like brute force is what I'm saying. Other than that, things are going fairly well. I've had some time to hang out with some friends and just taking it one day at a time. It's really all you can do. I asked my mentor towards the start of this, like, do the days go by quick? Like, how fast does it all feel? He basically said he doesn't even keep track of time anymore, and you start to time things based off when your next exam is, and he's right. It really is that way. But, well, paying good money to be here, so I gotta stick with it, and I want to stick with it, and so I'm giving you a open and honest look into what it's really like. No flashy editing, no nothing. Just the one guy rambling to his webcam. So, to that end, I think I'll go ahead and end this video. It's gone on for a little while. Somewhere it says how long it's been. I can't find, there it is, 18 minutes. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it was helpful in some form or fashion. And yeah, have a good day.